In December of 2022 was my first chance to review a BUL Armory pistol, and that was with this guy, the SAS2 Ultralight 3 1/4. I was excited about it. I was also nervous because pulling out of the box, how small it was, how light it is, and with only a 3 1/4 inch barrel, I was thinking, great, here is my first opportunity to interact with BUL Armory, and it's going to be a gun that I don't like. Got to the range with some nervousness. Tia didn't even want to shoot it. And once I started shooting, I found out how wrong I was. This quickly became a favorite. If you can't tell by some of the wear on it, it has become my summer carry gun. I've taken it to courses and shot it quite a bit through careful balancing of weight, careful balancing of spring pressures between the recoil spring and the mainspring, and other things. This is actually a really nice gun to shoot for the size and giving you pretty incredible capacity. Now we are at a suboptimal barrel, being under 4 inches, but there's plenty of plus P loads out there to help you make sure your round's going to do what it's supposed to. I found a round that this gun liked and really came to like this gun. At EWA Classics in Nuremberg, Germany in spring of 2024, we got to see the 2024 model, and finally it's made its way to the US here in November of 2024. I'm sure some of you are saying, hey, that's pretty late, but also realize the US is not the only market for BUL Armory, and realize that Israel's been a bit busy in 2024. But we have the new 2024 version of that ultralight for a tabletop review and field strip coming up next on GBGuns. And yes, I said Israel, and before any of you go typing your angry political or racial-based comments, please realize that BUL Armory is completely independent from the Israeli government. They are a private company run by private citizens, making things for private citizens just like you and I. So let's shut up about that stuff and look at the gun for the gun's sake. The boxes have changed to this charcoal color. Does that really matter? Probably not. The bags have also changed to the black color. And as with all of BUL's premium guns, you get a very nice range bag. The bag itself has plenty of room for your GBGuns patch, should you be fortunate enough to have one. We have a pocket here for ID. The rest of it is plain, but it does have an actual spine to it, so it can stand and it can stack decently with some strength. You have locking eyelets on the zippers, and if you couldn't tell, they're nice zippers. I'm not kidding about this being a nice range bag. Opening the flap, you've got room for 6 magazines on the side here. For documentation, flap here for divider. There's the gun. We have 3 magazines. You get a BUL Armory labeled federally mandated lock for here in the US, as well as a nice durable chamber flag for ranges that require that. To show you underneath here, this is all hook and loop with these straps so that you can create something to retain guns or organize within if you'd like, which is really nice. Now, before we get into that, we'll take a look at what's in the goodie bag. Going into this, please realize that I am fortunate enough to have an early sample. So the manual that's in here is just a generic SAS2 1911 manual. We get decals, which is one of the fun things with BUL Armory. You get some spirited stuff, and it seems to be, and maybe this is a tease, maybe this is just happenstance, but it's never the model that you got. It's oftentimes other models making you want other things. Alright, so in this bag, we have our BAO plate. That's the BUL Armory optics system. If you're not familiar with this and haven't seen it from our other reviews of 2024 models of BUL Armory, they have done a brilliant thing and made, if you can see that post there, that nub, on the larger guns, it's a hole in the plate, and the post is part of the slide that pokes through the plate. On this one, the plate is what has the nub, but that nub serves as a recoil boss, and as you can see, it is rectangular, which means it's going to be serving as a recoil boss for forces forward and side to side, which means all the stress will be on there. And yes, this is metal, so the screws themselves are only clamping. They are not trying to take shear force, which is something, if you're familiar with engineering and the designs of fasteners, screws and bolts are not meant for shear force, which is side to side. They're meant to clamp. With this design, they get to clamp, and you can see our nubs there for the optic. This is for a KRMSC type optic, which makes sense for such a small pistol. We also have a nice BUL Armory patch with the backer to the Velcro in case you want to apply it to something that doesn't already have Velcro on it. I realize there are still some folks out there who go and get stuff sewn on, and I think that's cool. We have an actual metal cleaning rod, as well as 2 brushes, a takedown tool, because this is a full-length guide rod, more on that later, and a magwell made of aluminum, along with a larger pin to fit across the mainspring housing to keep that pin in place. Now onto the manual. I look at manuals to see how well the company wants you to understand the product. It's kind of a bummer here that we may or may not have something super specific to this model. If you're curious about specs, pricing, availability, as always, check the pinned comment. That's where I post that stuff. It both saves you and I time from it being a boring reading of numbers here in the video, and it lets me update things, etc., as well as be free from YouTube censorship about those types of things. We have photos illustrating the major points. Everything else seems clear. And it is kind of a generic thing because once you know a 1911, you know a 1911, plus or minus the full-length guide rod, which we'll cover when we get into the field stripping. I also show this because this lets YouTube know that when I field strip this thing, I'm doing end-level user safety and inspection, not modifying the gun, not gunsmithing. Sorry YouTube, you can pound sand with your anti-gun rhetoric. A quick note on the magazines: while this is a double stack 1911, the magazines are not the same as the quote-unquote 2011s or things of that batch. They're slightly different in that they cost less and they hold 1 more round of capacity for their size, giving this little guy, which is just at a 3-finger grip for me, 16 rounds plus 1 instead of 15, and the longer stocked ones like the TAC and EDC are 17 plus 1 rather than 16. So that is a nice advantage. And if you're asking, yes, this does beat Stacatto pretty much in every way on paper. All the specs, the capacity, the weight, and the pricing, and that's why I'm a fan of BUL Armory, in addition to the fact that they are willing to be subjected to the very fair and equal GBGuns evaluation, whereas Stacatto has preferred to stick to your more influencer type who will make a highlight reel for that gun and not go into nearly as much detail. Yes, Stacatto, I'm calling you out. I am massively curious about the changes beyond just the visuals, what's different between the 2 model years. I won't go too much into that in this video because I realize that these are hard to get. You see, BUL Armory is in several countries, not just the US, and pretty much every shipment they send to the US sells out the same day that they announce it's available. You have to get on a wait list, and as soon as you get the email confirmation that the thing's available, jump on it. It's a rough deal. So there may be very few people who had the privilege of trying the S2 Ultralight, but at the service level, and I'll go into weights and things in the pinned comment to show the real differences, we had a change in texture. The S2 Ultralight had this kind of softer, better for your tummy diamond grip on it, whereas the larger ones had the more aggressive laser fissure type texture on it previously. They've now moved to having that on the small one, and I can say, having shot this in Oklahoma heat at the Guardian Conference, this did get slippery for me in that condition. Here in Oregon, without as much heat and without as much sweat, it's not been a problem. So if you're in a warmer climate, you might appreciate that. The silver accents are gone, replaced with black. They changed the slide serrations from the straight cut to the more kind of angular cut that we first saw actually on the Axe line, BUL Armory's Glock pattern pistols. There's also been some changes to slide design, with weight reduction happening in different places in different ways than it did previously, as well as we've gone to a one-piece guide rod in the new one. Further details and differences and stuff, like I said, check the pinned comment. I won't hit you guys with it too much since I realize that there's not necessarily going to be as many people wondering what the difference is between these two. One of my points of concern was I love this fluted barrel setup, and they went with a different way to reduce weight on the barrel. What difference does that really make physically, and what difference will it make performance-wise? We'll wait and see. Now on to our standard tabletop review. Putting in an empty magazine, we'll lock to the rear. Obviously you can see clear. And we're looking to see, do we get magazine ejection or release? Looks like just ejection. That would be scary, except we've got a metal body magazine in a polymer frame, so it drops free quite easily. And I can verify that, just summarize this, having run both the SAS2 Ultralight and the SAS2 4 1/4 in multiple courses and training events over the last 2 years. Never had an issue with these mags dropping out. So what are you getting with this thing? Well, you're getting a 3 1/4 inch barrel, very short, handy for either the appendix carry folks who want a shorter slide, or what I did, summer carry strong side, just for a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller end of a stock as well, and a lighter pistol overall. I tell you, if you carry this with something like the Liberty Ammunition 50 grain plus P, which is what I've carried this with, it's really lightweight, and it sadly, at higher capacity and, well, great shooting dynamics, was lighter than some of my previous carry guns with lower capacity. When they say ultralight, they are not kidding on this thing, and you will see that in the specs. Coming up front, slide to frame fit is tight, and that, by the way, I know 1911 guys like to get all wrapped up in that. What's really important in 1911 design is your barrel lockup, and there is no movement here. If the slide is moving or shifting, being slightly different shot to shot, so are your sights. So it doesn't really matter. And in recovery of recoil, I'm sure it'll be right there. You guys can see plenty of footage of me shooting this thing with, I would say, decent proficiency. We have 3 rail slots underneath. Could you really fit something in that last rail slot? Probably not, but guess what? Cutting there helps reduce weight. Additionally, this frame here is aluminum, and below is polymer. That's part of how we're dropping so much weight. See, we have a BUL barrel design and a one-piece guide rod. I love the green fiber optic front sight. That really pops. My only issue with it, is your sight picture, is that I also like green dots if I'm going to be running a dot. Fortunately, I don't do that on carry guns, so it works just as well. But yeah, on the 4 1/4 inch gun, which originally had a blacked out front sight for the use of dots, I swapped to a green fiber optic and then later put on a green dot because people want to see dots. And then I found myself looking at 3 dots, or two green dots. Anyways, we have a little bit of texturing on the front of the trigger guard here. Nice double undercut of the trigger guard to allow you to get a little bit higher. And what I do as someone who carries a light separately rather than a light on my gun, my basic argument for that is it keeps the gun lighter. It makes the gun not a flashlight, and it means if I need a flashlight, I have a flashlight without necessarily pulling out my gun. But that leaves this rail space open, which my thumb fits in very nicely to serve as a ledge. Those things that people are seeking now for recoil control, just fit your thumb right there in the rail. Texturing on the front strap is a nice checkering. You can see our laser stippling here. Magazine release protrudes a little bit, but not hugely. You can see that the slide release is barely reachable for my XXL hands. If you don't have XXL hands, you're going to have to do the classic 1911 thing of insert a magazine and with your support hand and rock that thumb up to drop the slide. Underneath our magazine well, we have a little bit of beveling. There is also an included aluminum magazine well if you want to use it. Now, YouTube won't let me show you dropping this pin to install that and put in the longer pin, but that's how you do it. Backstrap checkering matches the front, and you can see our grip safety. We do have a shortened abbreviated beaver tail here, as well as a bobbed hammer. That helps reduce overall weight, but it also really helps reduce printing. And what I've found, although you might be saying, hey, we've got a sharp point here and a sharp point here, this is going to snag, this overall curve when it's under a garment helps kind of bridge. And so I didn't have any snagging issues with that, but of course that's with me carrying strong side. The safety levers here are indeed big enough to rest a thumb on, at least for my hand, and fit very nicely there. You can even kind of bias outward so you don't end up dragging your thumb on the slide. See, we've got an adjustable rear target sight that is blacked out. I love that. And those 2 screws in there, you remove that to install your optics plate. if you want to run a dot of the micro footprint pattern. We have an ambi safety, no ambi magazine release or a slide release. Next, we'll field strip the ultralight and take a look inside the gun. Field stripping little ultralight is going to look familiar to anyone who's done a 1911 with a full-length guide rod. We're going to lock the slide to the rear, and there is a small hole in that guide rod right there. Now, I do normally use a GBGuns custom tool, which is an advanced process using a paper clip that is custom formed to the firearm by closing the slide on it. But today we're going to do this with the included BUL Armory tool, which looks like a little tiny Allen wrench, except it's rounded. You want to fish that in there, and that can be tricky, which is why I tend to like the paper clip, because usually the elbow gets in my way, which it appears to be doing again. Let me try from the other side, even though physically that's the exact same thing. If you guys ever worked on a car and tried to get a hard bolt, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes just coming at it from a different angle, the stars align better for you. And I'm not quite getting it, so it's time for the custom special limited edition GBGuns tool. And here it is. Now, it's currently custom formed for the old SS2 Ultralight. Is it going to fit, or am I going to need to go back to the shop and reforge another? I'm just kidding. Really, the way this works is you notice that this leg is shorter. That allows me to get more of it in the hole before the elbow gets in the way between the frame. And look at that. It fits, folks. That is some continuity in design between the two guns. Now we're going to release and let that close. You are going to want to bring the slide back to that little window to be able to press out your slide release lever, which is fairly flush on these, and everything fits a little tight in the beginning. I usually have to push on something from the other side, which is going to require another custom GBGuns tool, which for today's episode will be the Mechanic Optic tool. What makes it custom? Well, I just used it for something other than Mechanic Optic. Alright, now our slide release lever is loose. We can pull that out and let our slide go forward, and we should be able to pull everything right off the gun. We have some binding. Is that happening because of my custom slide tool? I'm going to have to figure that out. Silly thing that I just forgot. So when this happens, the barrel is no longer in place. Make sure the barrel is pulled forward, and then the slide will come off easily. Nice tight fit there. Now we can take a look at our frame. I'll let you guys comment on things you see. Now, as far as getting the barrel out, push the barrel back to the rear, and we should be able to bring our recoil assembly out through the back, like so, and leave it under pressure. So we've got a flat coil spring and a steel guide rod. Now, by knocking this link down, we can bring the barrel out the front and take a look inside the slide, and you can see that this is indeed a 70s series, which some of you are going to say is not drop safe. Theoretically, you are right. I asked for an example of when this specific model was dropped and fired and what the results were. When that's reported on enough times, then I will worry. Otherwise, in the meantime, sorry folks, potential hazards that aren't proven or demonstrated yet, to me, are not yet hazards. And now we can take a look at our little 3 1/4 inch barrel, and you can see these, of course, the locking lugs, but we did have some weight shave here, which also permits for a little bit of a ramp to serve for our bull barrel. Nice flat face, gorgeous barrel. A little bit of schmut there from test firing. Let me wipe that off before we do our chamber fitment. And no, I don't believe that was Yiddish. That was just me making a sound that sounded appropriate for the type of dirt that I was seeing. I believe the Yiddish would have been Schmutz, which would come derived from German for dirt or filth. We can see we've got a nicely polished feed ramp there. I'm going to use some Liberty Ammunition Civil Defense. Although this is just a 50 grainer, it is very nicely machined ammunition to spec, and the nickel-plated casing is corrosion resistant, which helps for a round I'm going to handle a lot like this. It also reduces friction. When we drop this in, we're going to be listening for a plunk, just like that. We want to make sure the round can turn freely, checking the bore for any burrs, and it's spinning very nicely. and we can see that we've got absolutely full chamber support, which is excellent because if you're running a barrel this short and you want your hollow points to perform as intended, you're either going to need a specialty load for sub 4-inch barrels or to run plus P, which is what I do in this guy for carry purposes. Now I will reassemble this while telling you what you can expect to see in the shooting impressions video. Reassembly is of course simply inversing this assembly process, but sometimes it can have some tricks. In the shooting impressions video you will see absolute first shots through the gun, and believe me guys, that is something that is painful for me to have to wait to do when I'm excited about a gun. For example, I will be going to the range tonight. I'm filming this probably 3 weeks before you're going to see the video, but I want my first shots on video so you guys can see them and get a real impression of the gun. And I won't be doing a video tonight. I'm doing some training tonight. Anyways, absolute cold shot first shots through the gun. Do a full magazine plus one to demonstrate how these guns run and these mags run fully stuffed. Might be of interest if you're not familiar with BUL Armory's magazines yet. Then we will do full magazine plus one, already talked about. Then from there, we'll take it over to the what's for dinner test to see what the gun eats, running 10 additional loads through it, deliberately going silly high, silly low, and with different case materials. And what is going on here? Why won't this? You know what I'm going to do? Rather than mess with this magic, I'm going to release this spring now and have everything be like normal. I'm going to do that by pressing on it, which is going to take some force. I'm probably going to have to do it off camera on the edge of the table, and then pull the GBGuns custom tool out and slowly release the pressure so that the spring is all locked in. There we are. After the what's for dinner table, take it to the spinner for sights and trigger control, which should be pretty nice, and reminds me that I have not shown you guys the trigger talk on this gun yet. What's going on here? What? Oh, guide rod's not sitting all the way in. There we go. After sights and trigger control, some practical accuracy, which is 5 shots from 7 yards, freestanding. Really, that's where I collect my final thoughts on the gun before giving them to you in the after shots section of the gun. There we go, everything's back together. Good functions check. Yes. Alright, now to the trigger talk. Something you might all be curious about. Double stack 1911s, especially finer guns from companies like BUL Armory that make race and competition guns. Is the trigger a responsible one? Well, first off, you do have a grip safety, which helps quite a bit, but let's take a look at that trigger. Light tick up to a wall. Very crisp break, minimal over travel. Very short reset. That's right back at that wall again. These are go fast triggers. If you want to go fast with them, you can. Is the weight inappropriate for carry? I don't think so. It's probably a touch on the lighter edge. I don't mention poundage because really poundage is not as important as feel and predictability, and this is definitely a trigger where you can tell where the wall is. You can feel that wall and break it when you want to. That to me is more important than weight because that tells me I can control when this gun fires. It's just a matter of learning how much weight to apply. How does it perform? We'll see that in the range video, and once again, as always, check the pinned comment for the full review over at my website, which YouTube won't let me mention anymore, but that's ironically part of why I have that website, and I do recommend you sign up for the mailing list there in case there's ever massive censorship striking YouTube again. That website will be how I reach you because I pay to host that site, and it's not cheap. But I do it because I got tired of censorship and getting shut down. Just the other day I had yet another video removed from YouTube after being up for 4 years because suddenly they decided it was against a policy of some sort. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the range.
Michael W, David G, Okie Tuba, Fredo, Robert B, Ohio, Crawford, Steve, Briscoe County Jail, Rich, Red Sky, Waha MC, Fierce 76, Something Muncie, David F, keeping things on his level, Gary B, Layfest, Daniel DXE, JJ, Adam J, Brad M, George H, Nathaniel Matt, Edward B, Adrian H, Cody W, Mark S, Sue Charlotte, Louis R, and B, Gary C, G, Logan G, Brian K, RBMD, 2022A, Gil B, Ron C, Gordon Mike, NC Techno